Hello, my fellow knightly folk. I understand nowadays we are kind of called tarnished or something else. Depending on to whom, you might even be called recusant, to whom you might even be called a bloody finger. But whichever the case, we share this decrepit land. Now I have an interesting, very deep sort of question for all of you. What is it you praise nowadays? And tell me, why is it more than likely that you praise the moon? Well, look no further. I know some of you probably didn't ask too deeply into this, because you probably were looking, probably at the moon. The only things that actually stay in the sky nowadays. In fact, I don't actually remember ever seeing a sun once I got here. And in fact, we actually never find any real altars or anything dedicated to the sun. No special, weapons or anything in blessing of the sun. It's kind of like an opposite of Dark Souls, if you ask me. But even in the most brightest, most beautiful places, the sun goes that way, mind you. So I'm looking where it should be going to. No matter how hard I look, no matter how long I wait, I'm yet to actually physically see a sun. And this is like the correct time of day that there should be a sun. In fact, it's actually implied that there is a sun, and yet we don't actually see one. So why isn't it that we don't actually have a real sun? To best understand the relevance of the sun to Elden Ring, we must first look at where it seems like it was once actually recognized, and what better place than whenever it actually makes an appearance or is worshipped. For example, on Dung Eater's chest piece, we see this medallion of a sun, and it is a lovely medallion if it were cleaner. But besides that, we see one other depiction, the Sun Realm Shield, which suggests there was once a city it was kind of like illuminated or something by the sun. Let's actually take a better look at these items now, rather than how I'm saying it. Shield of Honor depicting a city crowned by the sun. It has seen better days. Much like the wear upon the shield, the seat of the sun is long faded away. Interesting. And let's take a look at this chest piece. The Omen Armor chest piece Dung Eater wears. Resembles an omen with its horns cut off. Worn by the Dung Eater, the heavy sun-shaped medallion represents both the guidance he once saw and the ring to which it will one day lead. So, theoretically, it should suggest it means something like the Golden Order to the Elden Ring or something like that, as like a tarnished. However, why would this be his alone to believe this? And why did it change? These are some very plaguing questions, and it doesn't quite make sense why it would change, because it's still the Golden Order. Look where the Sun Realm Shield even comes from. It's not this Bone Boy, but I think he comes from a similar age, so we'll look at him a little better in a sec. It would indeed come from this fella. A literal skeleton. And he also has a sun depicted on his back. Why this is the case, and we don't see this anywhere present, is a complete mystery to us, as it's not quite suggested why. So why might he be so special? I am not too good at parrying. But all the same, they seem to have been buried alongside each other, along with these bandit swords. So let's take a look and see if maybe the bandits could tell us a little bit about where these guys come in terms of age, which I do happen to have one of their swords here somewhere. Here we are. Curved sword with a light crescent-shaped blade, used by the bandits who ran rampant in the wake of the shattering. Most of the blade is now darkened and covered in rust, but with enough dexterity, this weapon may still stand up to some use. Now, something I should also mention is that we can actually find these weapons within Farum Azula. Farum Azula, however it's pronounced. I'm not too sure, honestly. But we would see these on the skeletons of beastmen, not on the live beastmen, only on the skeletons, which kind of depicts that there was a sort of date to this. But there is one other notable thing to kind of look at to the subject. There was one other sort of notable series of depictions that look kind of sun-like. You guess what the next one is going to be? The Epitaph Blade and the Gold Mask. Now, why might I be depicting these? Well, as for the Gold Mask, apparently Gold Mask himself once saw some kind of brilliance that no longer is there. Let's sort of show you what I mean by that. Gold Mask himself was a pursuer of the Golden Order fundamentalism, which means he basically liked the smarter side of the Golden Order, where instead of strict faith, it was more intellectual. Its striking design represents both the brilliant inspiration that once shone upon him, and the vision of a ring that will surely find at the end of his pursuit. Which is very interesting. But why might I be suggesting the Epitaph Blade is of any significance? Well, as it were, it is actually in... No, I'm gonna word it poorly. To commemorate the death of Godwyn the Golden, first of the demigods to die, infused with a humble prayer of a young boy. "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." But if you're noticing something unusual about the design, the inside portion of the top is kind of hollowed, but the outside is more heavily decorated. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Godwyn the Golden. We're never told why he's called the Golden. We're never implied why he's called the Golden. We know he was a hero before the Shattering, who saved Leyndell from a dragon attack. He defeated Grandsax, and he befriended Fortisax. he is a story that is virtually an opposite of one we've seen before. But let's not talk about that just yet. In short, we know virtually nothing about him except for afterwards. Afterwards, he would become represented by the eclipse. Now, ask me this, or let me ask you this. What is an eclipse? An eclipse is a state of the sun, an event, horizon of the sun, blocked out by an object to the viewer. Often by the moon, mind you. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's why it became the eclipse. Is that because he was slain by Ranita Witch? But I am implying he more than likely was the sun. In fact, it would actually add another layer of depth to the understanding as to why he was the first of the demigods slain. But more than that, also why his men would represent in his servitude as a soulless demigod as an eclipse. Because it does strictly specify that he was represented as an eclipse as a soulless demigod, but why eclipse specifically was left to be imagined. But it would make perfect sense if prior to his unfortunate circumstances, if he was once represented as the sun, and that his men had a very different look beforehand. These skeleton soldiers that can be found throughout the lands between, they could be remnants of faith in Godwin, the Golden Sun, perhaps. And there's more reasons to believe it than just my word for it, or because I want to believe it. But we see a sort of a parallel story, an opposite one at that take place in Dark Souls series. Now, FromSoft likes to do a lot of mirroring concepts for fun of it in Elden Ring when it comes to topics such as Dark Souls and that, just so it really isn't Dark Souls, and to help beat it through to us. But at the same time, those concepts were definitely an artwork of their own. But let's talk about another kind of story to this. Once upon a dark soul, there was a man, or I should say, a god, who would commit a foolish act of attempting to befriend a dragon, considered so heretical and foolish that his name would be stricken from history. This man would still be a sort of deity, a nameless war god of the sun. This man was Farum, a son of Gwyn, the firstborn. He would have one of the earliest designs of a sword spear, and boy did he know how to use it. But not only would he attempt to befriend a dragon, he would continuously keep trying to. He was still of the sunlight. He was still a war god, and soon a god of the storm as well, as he had taken some of the power of such a drake that he had successfully tamed, a storm drake, incorporated into his weapon. We would one day come across this war god and face him off. He was the Nameless King. And his remaining interactions would be severed and limited to the rest of the story. His name would be forgotten and unrecognized for many of years. And many times that the lands took new names and kingdoms rose and fell. In Dark Souls, the flames of chaos were life. In Elden Ring, the flames of chaos are death. But not only that, life would be what was truly brought the most, with trees and such, especially those who grew into being tree-like. In Elden Ring, we don't see a witch who became tree-like. We don't see some proper soul attempting to manipulate such a thing under the wishes of royalty and deities. We see a deity who instead would leak destined death through a tree's roots and sprout death through a tree. An interesting parallel is that instead of a fire giving life to everything like it did in Dark Souls, we would instead see that trees have done such a thing here in Elden Ring. These worlds are so similar, and yet their differences so very great. In fact, it's very much so in a more of an opposites sort of manner, where we see a much brighter, colorful world than one so dark and demanding of us. Within Elden Ring, we have the implications of a sun that we never find. We have practically the dreams of Solaire in a world where there is no sunshine to praise. If Solaire himself came to this place, he would be perhaps the most depressed. It's still up for a debate whether or not this game has any sort of connections or timelines to Dark Souls or anything like that in general, which really is perhaps more of a joke than anything else. But at the same time, if you find patches in a game, it does kind of egg you on to think otherwise. But that's everything I have for you today. To kind of better summarize, I do believe, more than likely, the sun that once was Godwyn the Golden. Any remarks and faiths that were of a son died with him. Thank you so much for watching. This is Blue Esther's Solstice, and you all have yourselves a wonderful day. If you have any questions, suggestions, or ideas that could contribute to any of this, I'd love to hear them down in the comments or whatever. Until then, goodbye.